Even though this says Chapter 9, it is really Algebra Review. It was Chapter 9 in the book it came out of from the old days. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to review absolute value of a number. We know the absolute value of a number is always positive. It's usually used to find distance. If I were to look at -3 would mean 3 units backwards. So the negative or downwards. So in science, a negative number usually means you're moving against the grain, you're going back. So if I were looking at what is the distance with -3, I'd take the absolute value of it would make it +3. And of course the absolute value of +5 is +5. Absolute value of 0 is 0. So if I were to take the absolute value of the opposite of the square root of 3, what would that be equal to? Just plain the square root of 3. Now, although absolute value is a grouping symbol, per se, it doesn't act like a set of parentheses. It acts more like square. So in order of operations, that would say I'd have to do the absolute value first before I do anything else. Because you have, well, negative times a negative is a positive. That's if it were parentheses. But absolute value doesn't act like parentheses, although it is a grouping. This would say take the opposite of the absolute value of -7/10, which is +7/10. So your answer ends up being -7/10. So absolute value acts like something called an operator rather than an operation. Operators, square roots on operator. That means that's something you have to do before you can do anything else to it. Order of operations, everybody has their own version of order of ops. We had an instructor who went through, and of course I learned PEMDAS, please mind my dear Aunt Sally. But when I looked at it, it's more, it's kind of like a lie, because multiplication and division really have the same priority, and addition and subtraction really have the same priority. So you don't do multiplications before you do divisions necessarily, or you don't do additions before you do subtractions necessarily. So we had an instructor who basically used to Pemel. He had a tie that had Pemel down the front, so you knew when he was doing order of operations in class, he wore his Pemel tie. And that means parentheses, exponents, multiplication, division, addition, subtraction, left to right. So it then takes this and groups it together and then tells you you're always operating from left to right. Computers do the same thing, operate from left to right, yeah.
Why do we exclude brackets from that?
Well, to me it's always grouping symbols. Well, that means that then that's what he did. He changed it from Pemel to Gamal, which is grouping symbols, exponents, multiplication, division, addition, and subtraction, left to right. So he no longer Pemeled, he Gamaled after that. So yeah, all grouping symbols. And by the way, absolute value acts like a grouping symbol. Square root acts like a grouping symbol. Even though technically speaking they're not a grouping symbol. Order of operations. And we're looking at grouping symbols get done first, and such as parentheses. And you start from the innermost, work your way out. You're going to be doing exponents, multiplication, division from left to right, addition, subtraction from left to right. And always working from left to right. Now all of these scientific calculators, if I'm looking at any scientific calculator, whether I'm talking about the grapher or whether I'm talking about have a little guy here. This guy, which is a TI-30, some of the other ones don't quite do it this way, but these guys operate under order of operations. So if you come out with the wrong number, that's because you told it you made an order of operations error. Because it follows the order of operations even when you don't. So that if you type it in just as you see it, you'll always come out with the right answer. That's the nice thing about this guy and the graphers. They operate pretty much on the same level. This guy has a screen which is 2 levels. Well, if I take a look at how I'm going to operate with this, 8 times -3 is -24. Subtract 5 times -6 is a -30. And the opposite of a -30 is a +30. That's why we say that a minus and a minus is a plus. So -24 plus 30 is going to give me a +6. I still don't like that pen. I don't have much choice at the moment. Now, if I look at this guy, squares, exponents get done first before multiplications. Because I look at this as a multiplication, I look at this as an exponent, a subtraction, a multiplication, and an exponent. Exponents have to get done first. Because I can't take 5 times -3 squared, because I don't know what -3 squared is. So this would be 5 times -3 squared is -3 times -3, or +9. Subtract 2, -2 squared is -2 times -2, or +4. Now I have a multiplication, a subtraction, and a multiplication. So multiplications get done. So 5 times 9 is 45. Subtract 4 times 2 is 8. And then 45 subtract 8, hopefully, is 37. Sometimes my arithmetic is pretty good. And sometimes it isn't. Depends on any given day. I can be very good or not very good. Now, if I wanted to kind of put it into my calculator, graphers operate the same way, by the way. I would put it in just as I see it on this particular calculator and on your grapher. This would be 5, parenthesis, opposite of 3, parenthesis, and it does have a square button. Both calculators do. If you don't want to use the square button, and that's this guy right here, and then subtract 2, parenthesis, the opposite of 2, parenthesis. You can instead use the little caret button, which is located here on this TI. On the graphers, it's usually over here below this button is usually over here on this side. That's the exponent key, and I just type whatever exponent I want. In this case, it's 2. It treats it as a square, and if I press equal, what number should I end up with? Woohoo! Yippee! I did. Okay? So as you put it in as you see it, you'll be just fine with numbers. Doesn't work that way with letters, but does work that way with numbers. If you're using the TI technology, what you have to be very, very careful of is that whether you're using the grapher or whether you're using something like the TI-30, this is a subtraction. These are operations. Additions, subtractions, multiplications, and divisions. This is the change sign key. So that says I want a negative number. It's very different. You cannot use this symbol to make yourself a negative number. It'll give you an error message. And they look very different. And here's what happens. If I press the subtract key, subtraction demands something in front and something in back. That's why it says, you didn't give me something in front. So it's going to put something in front. It's going to put A and S. And you say, well, what's A and S? That's the last calculation I did. A and S now holds the value of 37. And then you'd put in 37 minus whatever. That's always what happens, because subtraction demands a front and a back with a subtraction between. However, if I use the negation, notice it just allows me to go ahead and put that in there, and now you say, well, what number do you want to make negative? So on the TI technology, what you have is that you use a different symbol or a different key for subtraction and negation. Okay, so keep that in mind, because I get an error message. So it's not unusual. Sometimes you'll press the minus thinking it's you're going to change sign on something, and that's not essentially what it is. Many times if you don't have a TI and you need to change sign, you'll see a little plus minus. Plus minus is the change sign key. That says you type in 37. If you want a negative 37, you press instead of this, the plus minus, that puts a negative in front. So that's some of your other calculators, like the Casio usually has that set up that way. Not the Grapher per se, but some of their scientific calculators. So depending upon what you're going to be using. But like I said, the face of this in terms of the screen works just like the Grapher does. The only thing it doesn't do, it doesn't graph. And of course this is only like $12 versus $100. So, and depending on which direction you go, eventually you probably will need a Grapher somewhere along the line. So here we go. This says 10 squared, so this is an exponent, subtraction, division, exponent, multiplication, subtraction. Exponents get done first. So this is 100, subtract, 100, divide, exponent 5 squared is 25, multiplied times 2, subtract 3. So I've got the exponents done. Then I have a subtraction, a division, a multiplication, a subtraction. Multiplications and divisions get done next from left to right. That's why PEMDAS can get you into trouble, because I have the division coming before this multiplication. From left to right, the division comes first. So this is going to get done next. So it's 100, subtract 100 divided by 25, which is 4, times 2, subtract 3. Now I have a subtraction, a multiplication, and a subtraction. So multiplication gets done next. 100, subtract 8, subtract 3. Now I have all subtractions, and you just move from left to right. So this is 92, subtract 3. 92, subtract 3, hopefully is 89. And if I put that in my calculator, what should I get? 89. Well, let's see. Let me be brave. So 10 squared, subtract 100, divide 5 squared, times 2, subtract 3. I just put it in as I saw it. Woohoo! She shoots and scores again. Yes, you did it right. As long as it's numbers, just put it in as you see it, and you'll be just fine. Love those numbers sometimes. And sometimes numbers are just a pain. So, here we go, numerator and denominator. I've got a division, an addition, and a multiplication. So I can do the division first. 10 divided 2 is 5. Added 2, 12, 3 times 4. Denominator is going to be a pain. This is 12, subtract, 3 times 2 is 6, squared, which is 17 over 12 times 6 is 6 squared, which is 17 divide 36. Now, if you're going to put this in your calculator, because it's all numbers, make sure the numerator is in parentheses and the whole denominator is in parentheses. Because I've got parentheses squared, the calculator will handle it just fine. Otherwise, I'd have to put parentheses in. Because order of operations would do the numerator first, then it would do the denominator, just like we did, then it would perform the division. Numerator first, denominator next, then perform the division.